But I mean, do you want to talk Jimmy G? Or is it too early? Because you're stoking it up there with Jimmy G. Is that?
Yo, we can do Jimmy G. I mean, that's the domino effect, right? I mean, we've hit the Browns, we've hit most of the Panthers stuff, right? The domino effect would be who is left now on the quarterback market. One of these guys was going to go first. Garoppolo kind of screwed this up with his surgery, right? He threw the timing out for everyone. I mean, what do you think with Garoppolo now? Cleveland has Jacoby Brissett. I forgot that until I looked through the depth
They
chart this
very
morning.
quietly brought him in now.
Yeah,
Very quietly.
I assumed it was going to be a horror show after, the depth chart after Mayfield and Watts. I just didn't think they would have the cap allocation to be able to do that. That they probably in their mind already had budgeted for Baker leaving. Brissett's good enough, right? 20th best QB in the league, maybe when he starts and he's got given protection. That's perfectly adequate. So I don't know if they would do a Garoppolo deal, because how much money would you be committing to the cap if they brought in Jimmy Garoppolo? That can't even work, and I'm not even sure that you'd have to do such a restructuring. I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of him coming in, no, it's not going to work. There's no way they can afford that, especially with the amount of money they've given to Deshaun and the amount of money they've burnt with Baker. Am I crazy to think there's a situation where Jimmy G stays in San Francisco and plays?
I will say I just looked up. The Browns have $48 million in cap space right now, somehow. So they could absorb Garoppolo if they wanted to have it. If they find out Watson is indefinitely suspended, which could even be 2 years, could be a year, could be 6 months. Then maybe
and it could be so for a lot. Like, it doesn't seem to make. I mean, we're not legal experts, right? But it does not seem to make sense to suspend someone for a year and leave it at that. Like, there's serious allegations. It wrapped up last week. I'm not sure when we're going to hear something back on that, but I mean,
the NFL is pushing for indefinite because they are worried about saying we're doing 8 games and then there being a new accusation or being something. They want all the legal stuff as settled as plausible. The active legal stuff, I should say. Obviously, he settled a bunch of cases. There's 3 more civil cases still outstanding. They want all that to be finalized. Make sure there's no more criminal cases come forward, and then they can reinstate him after that. So it's more like they'll do the indefinite, and then the timeline will be based on the conclusion of the civil suits, and if there's another criminal accusation, and then if there's a further civil accusation, they'll probably just play it by ear and not resuspend him, I imagine. But that could be, as you say, it could be a year, it could be 18 months, it could be 3 days. You have no idea with that stuff. We just have no idea.
Well, they've got Josh Dobbs, who has flown 17 regular season passes in his career as well.
Josh Dobbs is a aeronautical engineer. Absolute genius. Is that one? Did people know that? Is that one of those? Someone went to Harvard.
I had no idea.
You had no idea. Okay, Josh Dobbs was an aeronautical engineer at Tennessee. Same as Matt Patricia, by the way. Turned down working for NASA to go play quarterback in the NFL. Josh Dobbs did.
Why didn't he even ask the Panthers for PJ Walker to have him in like just as a backup, like a real backup? Don't get me wrong, but just take him, because he's finished in Carolina now. Like, there's no way with Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and Matt Corral there that PJ Walker is going to get a sniff. Surely.
That's a good point. I would have even taken Darnold back. I think Darnold is terrible, but why not? What's the downside? If you could have made it work where Carolina eats a lot of they balance the budget of we'll eat some of one, you eat some of the other, or you just swap them and give us the pick. I'd have done that to have Darnold as a backup behind Brissett. At least Darnold knows like how to run a meeting and where the huddle is. The most primitive and basic of things. That'd have been worthwhile. Let's go back to Garoppolo though. So who are the candidates now then? They're not going to trade into Seattle, and I'm out. Who else? Where else is there? Am I missing someone?
Is there any situation in which he can go to Seattle? Because if he goes, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. You got Drew Lock, Geno Smith there. So even, I mean, Baker Mayfield would have walked in Seattle day one and been the starter, right? There has to be, even though it's the same division, there has to be a situation where he can go. I know there's the whole NFC West thing there, but
there's just no way. There's no way you could do that. We're still unsure quite how in everyone in the building is on Trey Lance. Obviously, that's the move they're going to go to. They did all the draft capital. As I've said on this before, I've written a ton about Trey Lance, so I exhaust myself digging back through the Trey Lance details. But there are plenty of reports, and you talk to anyone who's covered Kyle Shanahan, as clever as he is a tempestuous man. That's why his staff leaves him. And there's a sense with him of who's in the in club, who's in the out club day to day. One day he's like, let's trade for Trey Lance. The next day he's like, could we do a Tom Brady deal. The next day, he's like, you know what, Jimmy G's the guy. He can take us to the next level. Clearly, just with everything they've done from an organizational perspective, it's time to go with Lance. But what is the upside benefit, unless you just want to do a solid for Garoppolo as an organization, just using your resources? And I hate to speak of humans as resources, but it's the NFL as a hard cap. What is the upside in trading Garoppolo in division for like a 4th, 5th round pick, 3rd round pick, as opposed to just keeping him on the roster in case Lance is bad, Lance gets injured, or he's just not the player you thought he would be, or it doesn't take off the way you thought it would be, or you go through preseason and Garoppolo is just much better?
It feels like he's missed the boat in getting somewhere because, time is one thing. I think it was January, February time. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Browns came out and said that Baker Mayfield was a guy, and they're very happy with him. And now look at that situation. In the same aspect towards the combine, they come out, the 49ers, and said about Trey Lance, and he's going to be the starting quarterback. There does seem to be that it could change very quickly in San Francisco. And I know they've built it around Trey Lance, but when you've got Jimmy Garoppolo there, surely you've got a good option, in my opinion, a stable option. I was saying off air that we spoke on a different podcast to Ryan Leaf, and he was very vocal on that he thought the 49ers were making a big mistake. And it makes you think, at what point in the season would they change? Because if Trey Lance, it's going to take him time to gel. You can't just gel in 2 or 3 preseason games. He's going to need the first 6-7 weeks of the season, and you can't just pull the plug rawly and put Jimmy G in, because that then goes back on everything you've done both in the draft last year and getting them in the draft this year. But so again, it's very confusing with the 49ers. I don't know. If he's not going to go to Seattle, where else can he go?
I'm just looking through the league now. As you said, it's a miss the boat situation. Tennessee has Tannehill for this year. He's just as good, if not better, than Garoppolo. They got Malik Willis waiting in the wings, right? I'm just going through just back of a notepad type who could need a QB. Atlanta, they did Mariota, they draft Desmond Ridder, not going to happen. New Orleans is one you could talk yourself into. I think Dennis Allen would be up for that. I don't know how you make those finances work, and they kind of just said, we'll do one more year of Jameis, and then we'll figure it out next offseason, essentially. You keep going down the line. Detroit, Goff versus Garoppolo, not worth the hassle. Washington was the big one, right? They go in on Carson Wentz for reasons that remain unclear to everyone, except for the fact they wanted to get a news story out there to cover for Dan Snyder's numerous scandals. The Giants, I think Brian Daboll with Jimmy Garoppolo, they could have got them through a year comfortably, but they are absolutely content with going forward with Daniel Jones, and they would rather have signed Mitch Trubisky if he had picked there. So the numbers are the numbers, man. There's not a spot unless the Browns find out that Deshaun is suspended indefinitely, and they want to do that deal.
But it's funny because if he is suspended indefinitely, and it's looking that way at the minute, and we don't know what's going to happen. But if you're the 49ers and that happens, you have all the chips. You're looking at the Browns going, what, instead of a 4th or whatever you're going to get from him, you can try and get more out of him. You've really intrigued me there with some of those options. Detroit, New York, because I don't think Daniel Jones is going to be there. I don't think
that. I think those would have had to have been done pre-draft. That's the only. Those teams just have moved on. Garoppolo isn't good enough to be worth undoing your pre-season prep for teams that know they're not winning anything. They know they're not winning anything. So the only reason to bring Garoppolo in is your roster is so dominant and you lose someone. So now their hope is either an injury in the preseason or a suspension to Deshaun Watson. With Deshaun Watson and the Browns, it makes sense to go and get Garoppolo because the roster's so good. For all those other teams we've listed, what is the point of getting on that treadmill? It is pointless. The guy doesn't stay healthy. He's not good enough, and you may as well just go draft someone next year.